The silent departure. The galactic assembly chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of reinforced crystal, suspended in the gravity well of a neutron star. 67 civilizations had built this monument to cooperation over the course of 12 millennia. Each species had contributed materials from their homeworld, creating a structure that represented unity among the stars. The chamber floated in perfect balance, a testament to what could be achieved when advanced civilizations worked together. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell stood in the observation gallery, watching the session below. She had been Earth's representative to the Assembly for 8 years now. 8 long years of patience, diplomacy, and hope. Below her, delegates from across the galaxy discussed trade regulations with the kind of measured deliberation that came from having centuries to make decisions. For beings who lived hundreds of years, there was never any rush. Sarah was 42 years old. She would be lucky to see another 40 years. To the delegates below, she was barely more than a child. They treated her accordingly. The Assembly had discovered Earth 30 years ago during a routine survey mission. Humanity had just achieved faster-than-light travel, a crude and dangerous method compared to the elegant systems used by established civilizations. The Assembly had welcomed Earth with formal ceremonies and official protocols. There had been speeches about the family of galactic civilization growing larger. There had been celebrations and cultural exchanges. Then reality had set in. Humanity was given observer status, which meant they could watch but not participate in actual decisions. Human proposals were filed away in databases that nobody ever accessed. Human technology was examined with the kind of polite interest that adults show when a child presents a drawing. Human culture was noted, catalogued, and essentially ignored. Sarah had tried everything. She had organized scientific symposiums where human researchers presented discoveries. The alien scientists had listened with patient smiles, nodding at concepts they had mastered thousands of years ago. She had arranged cultural festivals showcasing human art, music, and literature. A few curious aliens had attended, sampled the offerings, and left early to attend more important functions. She had proposed military cooperation, offering Earth's fleet to assist with peacekeeping operations. The Assembly had thanked her for the offer and assigned the missions to species with more experience. She had suggested economic partnerships, but human goods were considered primitive compared to products made by civilizations with millennia of manufacturing refinement. The pattern was always the same. Humanity was acknowledged, thanked, and then set aside. Not with cruelty or malice, but with the kind of absent-minded dismissal that adults give to background noise while focused on important matters. Sarah's assistant, David Chen, approached quietly. He was 28, brilliant, and increasingly frustrated with their situation. He had joined the diplomatic mission full of idealism and hope. Now his eyes carried the weariness of someone who had beaten their head against an immovable wall for too long. "Ambassador, the Resource Allocation Committee just rejected our proposal," David said quietly. "They didn't even discuss it. Just filed it under pending consideration, which means it will sit there forever." Sarah nodded slowly. The proposal had taken 3 months to prepare. It had offered human assistance in mining operations in a contested asteroid belt. The work was dangerous and unprofitable, which was precisely why humans had thought they could be useful. Species with better options would never take such a job. But apparently, even dangerous work nobody wanted was too important to trust to humans. "Add it to the list," Sarah said tiredly. The list of rejections was very long now. 6 months later, everything changed. A human exploration vessel detected unusual energy readings in a remote system. The patterns were artificial, clearly created by some form of intelligence, but they did not match any known civilization in the Assembly database. The vessel investigated carefully and discovered something alarming. There were structures being built in the system. Massive installations that harvested stellar energy on a scale that even the Assembly rarely attempted. The structures were incomplete, but the technology was advanced. More importantly, the construction patterns suggested rapid expansion. Whatever was building these installations was doing so at an extraordinary pace. Sarah had brought the findings to the assembly immediately. She had presented the data, explained the implications, and urged investigation. This was exactly the kind of situation where the assembly's vast resources and experience would be invaluable. Unknown civilizations building mysterious installations could mean anything from a first contact opportunity to a potential threat. The assembly had listened to her presentation. Then they had thanked her for the information and moved on to the next item on their agenda. Sarah had waited for follow-up questions. None came. She had expected a task force to be organized. Nothing happened. She had assumed her report would at least be investigated by Assembly Intelligence Services. As far as she could tell, it was simply filed away with all the other human submissions. She had tried again 2 weeks later, presenting updated data. The installations were growing faster than initial projections suggested. The energy signatures were becoming more pronounced. Something significant was happening in that remote system, and the assembly needed to pay attention. The response was the same. Polite acknowledgement followed by complete inaction. One delegate had actually suggested that human sensors might be misinterpreting natural phenomena. After all, human technology was still quite primitive. Perhaps they were seeing patterns that were not actually there. Sarah had returned to Earth's embassy that night and sat alone in her office for 3 hours. She was not an impulsive person. She had dedicated years of her life to building relationships with the assembly. She believed in diplomacy and cooperation. But she also could not escape the simple truth staring her in the face. The Galactic Assembly did not respect humanity. They did not trust human judgment. They did not value human contributions. Humanity could spend the next 100 years trying to prove themselves worthy, and the result would be the same. Observer status, polite dismissals, and complete irrelevance. She opened a secure channel to Earth and requested a meeting with the World Council. The meeting took place 2 days later. Sarah made her case clearly and without emotion. Humanity was wasting time and resources trying to gain acceptance from a body that would never accept them as equals. The Assembly's indifference was not personal, but it was absolute. They had their established order, their comfortable hierarchies, and no interest in disrupting either. The World Council debated for a week. Representatives from every major nation participated. Scientists, military leaders, economists, and philosophers all weighed in. The discussions were heated, passionate, and thorough. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Humanity would withdraw from the Galactic Assembly. Not with anger or dramatic speeches. Not with demands or ultimatums. They would simply leave, quietly and completely, and focus their efforts on their own development. If the Assembly did not value humanity's presence, then humanity would stop wasting effort trying to change their minds. Sarah was given 90 days to execute the withdrawal. She coordinated the recall of every human diplomat, researcher, and observer from Assembly space. She closed embassies, terminated agreements, and settled all outstanding obligations. Human merchants were notified to complete their business and return home. Human students at Assembly universities were withdrawn. Human scientists working on collaborative projects submitted their final reports and departed. She did everything by the book, following every protocol and procedure. When Assembly officials asked about the withdrawals, she provided polite, non-committal answers. Administrative reorganization. Budget constraints. Policy review. She never mentioned the real reason because it would serve no purpose. The Assembly noticed the activity but did not seem particularly concerned. Humans had always been transitory, coming and going with the nervous energy of short-lived species. If they were pulling back their personnel, it was probably just another phase. They would return eventually when they realized how much they needed the Assembly's resources and protection. On the final day, Sarah stood in the embassy one last time. The building was empty now, all equipment removed, all files transferred. She recorded a brief message to be delivered to the Assembly's administrative office. The message was professional and brief. Humanity was withdrawing from participation in assembly activities. All formal agreements were terminated. Earth thanked the assembly for the opportunity to observe galactic civilization. Humanity wished all member species prosperity and peace. That was all. No explanation of why. No list of grievances. No emotional appeals. Just a simple statement of fact. Sarah sealed the embassy, turned over the keys to assembly officials, and boarded the last transport back to Earth. As the ship pulled away from the station, she looked back at the crystal chamber where she had spent so many years. It glittered in the light of the neutron star, beautiful and eternal. She felt no sadness. No regret. Only relief that the charade was finally over. The assembly filed humanity's withdrawal notice in their administrative databases. A junior clerk noted that another species had failed to integrate into galactic society. It happened occasionally. Not every civilization was ready for the responsibilities and complexities of assembly membership. Perhaps in a few centuries, humanity would mature enough to try again. The file was marked as closed, and the clerk moved on to other matters. 30 years passed. In that time, the Galactic Assembly continued its work. Trade routes were maintained. Disputes were mediated. New technologies were shared among member species. The vast machinery of galactic civilization ran smoothly, as it had for 12,000 years. Nobody thought about humanity. Nobody wondered what they were doing in their isolated corner of space. Nobody checked on them or sent diplomatic inquiries. As far as the assembly was concerned, humanity had retreated back into obscurity where they belonged. The silence from Earth was complete and absolute. No messages. No signals. No ships entering assembly space. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from the galaxy, leaving nothing behind but old records that nobody bothered to read. The assembly did not know that this silence was deliberate. They did not understand that humanity had not retreated in defeat but had simply decided to walk a different path. They could not imagine that the species they had dismissed so easily was about to change everything. The silence would not last forever. But when it finally broke, the Galactic Assembly would discover that the greatest mistake they had ever made was letting humanity leave without trying to understand what they were truly capable of. The fear awakens. The emergency session of the Galactic Assembly convened with unprecedented urgency. Chairman Veltros, a being whose species had been part of the Assembly for 8,000 years, looked across the chamber at representatives who showed something rarely seen in this ancient body, genuine fear. The crisis had begun 6 months ago in the Outer Rim territories. A plague unlike anything in recorded galactic history had emerged on 3 separate worlds simultaneously. The disease was sophisticated, attacking biological systems at the molecular level. It adapted to every treatment the Assembly's medical experts attempted. Millions were dying, and the infection was spreading. The Assembly had mobilized every resource. Their greatest scientists worked around the clock. Their most advanced medical facilities were dedicated entirely to finding a cure. Nothing worked. The plague adapted faster than they could develop countermeasures. For the first time in millennia, the Assembly faced a problem their accumulated knowledge could not solve. Then the packages started arriving. The first one appeared at the Central Medical Research Station orbiting Proxima Secundus. Security systems detected nothing. One moment the loading bay was empty, the next moment a sealed container sat in the center of the floor. No ship had docked. No transport had delivered it. The container simply appeared. Security Chief Mara Thon had quarantined the area immediately. Her team scanned the container from every angle, checking for explosives, biological weapons, radiation, or any other threat. The scans showed nothing dangerous. Just a sealed box made of an alloy that their sensors could not fully analyze. Inside the container were 3 items. The first was a data module containing detailed analysis of the plague, including its complete molecular structure and replication mechanism. The second was a synthesizer capable of producing a compound that would neutralize the plague's adaptive properties. The third was enough of the compound itself to treat 10 million patients. The data module included instructions written in 70 different languages, including assembly standard. The instructions were clear, precise, and most importantly, they worked. Within 48 hours, medical teams had verified the cure. Within a week, the plague's spread was halted. Within a month, it was completely eradicated. Nobody knew where the package had come from. The container itself left no identifying marks. The data module contained no signature or origin code. The synthesizer was built using principles that assembly engineers recognized but combined in ways they had never considered. Whoever had sent the cure wanted to remain anonymous. The second package appeared at a military installation in the Kepler sector. This time, security cameras caught the moment of arrival. The footage showed empty space in the storage facility. Then, for exactly 3 frames, there was a blur of motion too fast for the cameras to properly capture. Then the package sat on the floor, as if it had always been there. This container held solutions to a critical reactor design flaw that had plagued assembly ships for decades. The flaw caused random power failures that had cost hundreds of lives over the years. Assembly engineers had accepted it as an unavoidable limitation of their propulsion technology. The package contained modified reactor components and detailed instructions for retrofitting existing ships. The modifications were elegant, simple, and completely effective. More packages followed. They appeared at research stations, military facilities, and government centers across assembly space. Each one contained solutions to problems the assembly was struggling with. Advanced water purification systems for drought-stricken worlds. Improved shield generators that used 30% less power. Agricultural techniques that increased crop yields without requiring genetic modification. Communication relay designs that extended signal range by a factor of 10. Every package was anonymous. Every solution worked perfectly. And every design showed subtle traces of thinking that felt familiar but could not be quite identified. Intelligence Director Cale Vaughan was the first to notice the pattern. He had been tasked with investigating the mysterious packages, and he approached the problem with the methodical precision that had made him the assembly's top intelligence officer. He studied each package, each design, each solution. He looked for commonalities in the technology, the materials, the thinking behind the innovations. What he found disturbed him greatly. The designs consistently combined technologies from multiple assembly species. A propulsion concept from the Veltari merged with power distribution systems from the Corthan and control mechanisms from the Zelic. No single assembly species thought to combine technologies this way. They each had their own approaches, their own methods, refined over thousands of years. Cross-species collaboration happened, but it was rare and usually limited to specific projects. Whoever was sending these packages thought differently. They saw connections between different technological philosophies. They borrowed ideas from multiple sources and synthesized them into something new. It was an approach that required deep understanding of many different systems and the creativity to see how they could work together. Cale pulled up historical records, searching for any civilization that had demonstrated this kind of synthetic thinking. His search led him to files he had not reviewed in 30 years. Files marked with a single word, humanity. He spent 3 days reviewing everything the assembly had on record about humans. Their brief time as observers. Their various proposals and presentations. Their sudden withdrawal 30 years ago. He read Ambassador Sarah Mitchell's reports, studied human technological developments, and examined their cultural practices. The more he read, the more certain he became. The synthetic approach to technology, the practical solutions to complex problems, the tendency to combine different methods rather than pursuing a single philosophical approach, all of it matched human thinking patterns. But that was impossible. Humanity had been centuries behind assembly technology when they left. They had possessed basic faster-than-light travel and rudimentary energy weapons. Their medical science was primitive. Their computational systems were slow and inefficient. There was no way they could have advanced this far in just 30 years. Unless they had been learning the entire time they were observers. Unless they had been studying every species' technology, absorbing knowledge at a rate nobody had noticed. Unless they had taken that knowledge back to Earth and built upon it in ways the Assembly never anticipated. Cale presented his findings to the Security Council. The reaction was skepticism. Humanity was a minor species that had failed to integrate into galactic society. The idea that they were now advanced enough to provide solutions to problems that stumped Assembly experts seemed absurd. "Show me evidence," demanded Council Member Thera. "Show me actual proof that humans are behind these packages." Cale had no direct proof. Just patterns, correlations, and educated guesses. But he had been right about threats before, and the Council trusted his instincts. They authorized a full investigation. Intelligence assets across Assembly space were directed to search for any sign of human activity. The reports came back over the following weeks, and each one added to the growing picture. Border Patrol vessels reported detecting ships in deep space that vanished before they could be properly scanned. The ships moved with extraordinary speed and agility, using drive systems that did not match any known configuration. Survey teams found abandoned monitoring stations in remote systems, equipment still warm, clearly vacated just ahead of their arrival. Most disturbing were the reports from the frontier regions beyond Assembly space. Traders and explorers spoke of encountering vessels that would not respond to hails but never acted hostile. The ships were sleek and unfamiliar, bearing no identifying markings. When approached, they simply accelerated away at speeds that should have been impossible. One trader had managed to record a brief scan of such a vessel before it departed. Cale studied the scanned data carefully. The hull materials were unknown. The energy signature was unlike anything in Assembly databases. The propulsion system seemed to violate several principles that Assembly physics considered fundamental. But there was something in the scan that made Cale's hands shake as he reviewed it. A brief electromagnetic pulse, probably unintentional, that carried a data packet. The packet was encrypted, but the encryption method was recognizable. It was based on mathematical principles that humanity had presented to the Assembly 31 years ago during a cybersecurity conference that nobody had paid much attention to. Cale authorized deep space reconnaissance missions to regions where human activity might be concentrated. 3 missions were dispatched to different sectors. 2 returned with no significant findings. The third never returned at all. It simply vanished from all tracking systems while investigating a region near the Perseus Arm. A search and rescue mission was sent to find the missing reconnaissance vessel. They found it drifting in space, completely intact but abandoned. The crew was gone. No signs of struggle, no damage to the ship, no indication of what had happened. The ship's logs had been wiped clean except for a single entry. The entry was a text message in Assembly Standard: "You are not ready for what lies beyond. Return to your space and do not come back." This is not a threat. This is advice. The message was unsigned, but linguistic analysis suggested it had been written by someone whose native language was English. The Assembly convened another emergency session. This time, the topic was not a plague or technological problems. The topic was humanity. Chairman Veltros reviewed all the evidence Cale had compiled. The mysterious packages. The unidentified ships. The vanished reconnaissance crew. The message. All of it pointed to one conclusion. Humanity had not retreated into obscurity. They had been active the entire time, but operating in regions the Assembly had not explored. They had advanced their technology at a rate that seemed impossible. They had capabilities that matched or exceeded anything the Assembly possessed. And they were watching. "We need to make contact," suggested Ambassador Dreva of the Corthan Union. "If humanity has advanced this far, we should re-establish diplomatic relations. Think of what we could learn from them." Chairman Veltros nodded slowly. "Prepare a message. Use all channels, including the old human diplomatic frequencies. Invite them to return to the assembly as full members, not observers. Make it clear that we recognize their achievements and wish to establish an equal partnership. The message was crafted with care. It acknowledged that the assembly's previous treatment of humanity had been inadequate. It praised human innovation and advancement. It offered full membership with all associated rights and privileges. It expressed genuine desire for cooperation and mutual benefit. The message was sent on every frequency, broadcast from multiple relay stations, repeated continuously for weeks. There was no response. The silence from human space was absolute. The assembly tried again with different messages. They offered trade agreements, technology exchanges, joint research projects, and military alliances. They sent messages of apology for not taking humanity seriously. They sent messages of congratulations for humanity's achievements. They sent messages simply asking for acknowledgement that the transmissions were being received. Every message vanished into silence. 3 months after the first message was sent, a response finally arrived. It came through the same old diplomatic channels Ambassador Mitchell had used 3 decades ago. The message was brief, professionally worded, and delivered in a calm female voice that analysis suggested was artificially generated rather than an actual human speaker. The Galactic Assembly's messages have been received and reviewed. Humanity appreciates the Assembly's interest in re-establishing contact. However, after careful consideration, we must respectfully decline. 30 years ago, we chose to pursue our own path among the stars. That decision was correct, and we have no desire to change it. We wish the Assembly continued prosperity and peace. Please do not attempt further contact. We have moved on. That was all. The channel closed immediately after the message ended. Subsequent transmissions received no response. The assembly chamber filled with stunned silence after the message was played. They had never imagined that humanity would refuse. Species competed for assembly membership. Being part of galactic civilization was considered the highest achievement any species could reach. The idea that humanity would be offered full membership and simply say no was incomprehensible. But more disturbing than the refusal was the implication behind it. Humanity had moved on. They did not need the assembly. They did not want what the assembly offered. Whatever they had built for themselves in 30 years of isolation, it was sufficient that the greatest coalition of civilizations in the galaxy held no appeal. Chairman Veltros looked at his fellow representatives and saw his own fear reflected in their faces. For 12,000 years, the assembly had been the center of galactic civilization. They had been the standard by which all advancement was measured. They had been the goal that every species aspired to reach. Now there was a civilization out there that had walked away from them and never looked back. A civilization that possessed technology they did not understand. A civilization that was helping them anonymously while refusing direct contact. A civilization that was powerful enough to make assembly reconnaissance vessels disappear without a trace. The assembly had let humanity leave 30 years ago because they thought humans were insignificant. Now they lived with the terrifying knowledge that they had been completely wrong. Humanity had become something far greater than the assembly had imagined possible. And they had done it alone, without the assembly's guidance or approval. The packages continued to arrive. Solutions to problems continued to appear. The anonymous help kept coming. But now every package carried an unspoken message that everyone in the assembly understood. We do not need you. We never did. You were the ones who needed to learn from us. The Galactic Assembly had spent millennia as the dominant force in the galaxy. Now they lived in the shadow of a civilization they had dismissed, watching the stars and wondering what else humanity had achieved in the silence they had been too arrogant to break.